The Philippines is a country that used to be the most promising in Southeast Asia. And in Asia itself, it was second only to Japan. Sadly, it has floundered into becoming a country where massive unemployment and poverty have generally become the norm, where extremely poor people who have become more and more numerous are forced to eat leftover food that has already been discarded into the trash, and where millions of Filipinos are forced to leave their loved ones and families in order to work abroad, oftentimes in very menial work not commensurate to the higher education levels achieved by these workers. And this happens because decent paying jobs are just way too scarce. The Philippines has also consistently suffered from a crisis of leadership, in which good leaders may emerge, but are then replaced after their terms by incompetent buffoons who tend to erase whatever gains the relatively good leaders achieved during their terms. In the past, it was often argued that tropical countries like the Philippines and many others in Asia, Latin America and Africa tended to be inherently disadvantaged because, in contrast to temperate countries where the climate features winters that eliminate those who fail to work hard and plan ahead, the benign tropical climate does not force people to work as hard or plan in advance. It is quite true that for a long time, some of the poorest countries in the world tended to be those that were warm and tropical. Fortunately, there is a country that is also in the tropics that has proved that being tropical need not mean that economic success is necessarily elusive and exclusively reserved only for the so-called cold countries. Singapore has proved that a tropical country, despite its climate disadvantage, can actually become one of the most successful in the world, even beating many temperate countries that make up the first world in numerous performance indices. How did Singapore do it? The answer is in high-quality leadership that emerged through a highly meritocratic parliamentary form of government and an obsession with learning best practices from the rest of the world and not having to reinvent the wheel. In everything it did and continues to do, from the attraction of foreign direct investors to the adoption of best practices into government services from industry, or the adoption of the same from other societies, Singapore has proved that openness and the obsession with always taking the best works.
Next station, Rangoon.
No society in human history has improved the standard of living of its people faster and more comprehensively than Singapore has.
Next station, Kangkar.
Well, Singapore 40 years ago was a swamp with 500,000 people. Singapore now, 40 years later, is the country with the largest foreign currency reserves per capita of any country in the world.
Next station, Rumbia.
It's very practical and concerned with things that you can see and you can count.
Next station, Macau.
It's got the best education in the world, the best healthcare in the world. It's astonishing to come to Singapore and see that everything works.
Next station, Canvas Bay.
Singapore is a glimpse into the future of Asia. When Singapore was born in 1965, it was expelled from Malaysia. Everybody said, including the leaders of Singapore, that Singapore was going to become a failed state because Singapore was a city, like a heart of a body, detached from its hinterland. Now when you take the heart from the body, the heart dies. So everyone thought that Singapore would die. And it has become an absolute shock to Singaporeans that we've ended up having the most successful state in human history. How did we do that? It was because we had extraordinary leaders.
Whoever governs Singapore must have that iron in him, or give it up. This is not a game of cards. This is your life and mine. I spent a whole lifetime building this. And as long as I'm in charge, nobody's going to knock it down.
I cannot describe it. I can only tell you how it evolved. And how you would describe it is up to you, but this is the way I saw it. When we became independent in 1965, in August, we were a small island, suddenly without a hinterland. How do we make a living? When both Malaysia and Indonesia did not want to trade through us. And we decided our best chance was to make ourselves different from our neighbors. We must be different because we are different, and we must be different in a better way. What they cannot do, we must do. And gradually, we came to the conclusion that we should create a first world oasis in a third world region. The first thing is the economy. Without that, you have no jobs, no revenue, no nothing. So we started manufacturing, and we invited or attracted multinationals to invest in Singapore, build their factories here, made goods and exported it abroad. Then we had jobs. Then we had revenue. And with that revenue, we were able to build homes, build schools, educate them, build hospitals, and so we progressed. But without an economy, nothing works.
In the late 60s and 1970s, when Singapore was still struggling, all the developing countries said foreign investment is bad. Foreign investment is capitalists from America and Europe coming and exploiting you, exploiting your cheap labor, taking the profits and running away. And if you allow foreign investment in, it's like allowing yourself to be raped by foreign invaders. Singapore said no. Foreign investors create jobs. Foreign investors bring in capital. Foreign investors bring in markets for their products. Foreign investors train and develop our labor force. So Singapore did the exact opposite of all the developing countries. Now, for a small country like Singapore to go against the conventional wisdom of all of Latin America, all of Africa, all of Asia, Singapore says, no, we'll be different. So Singapore's capacity to ignore the conventional wisdom of the day and choose its own pragmatic solutions was quite unique.
Very little of what Singapore does is invented in Singapore. Very little. Our whole, to use the jargon, SOP, standard operating procedure, whether it's in cabinet or statutory board or a small public agency, is look at the rest of the world. Try to get some idea, some technique, some method that has worked well, and see how we can do it in Singapore, if possible better. Try to avoid the mistakes that have happened.
Now by 2050, the 4 largest economies in the world will be number 1, China, number 2, India, number 3, United States of America, number 4, Japan.
In that order.
In that order. And so power is shifting to Asia. It's inevitable. From the year 1 to the year 1820, the 2 largest economies in the world were consistently China and India. We are returning to the norm.
The sheer numbers of population, the Pacific will become the main economic center of the world as against the Atlantic. But it doesn't mean Europe and America or Eastern Seaboard will go down. It just means that these old civilizations have revived, that's all.
Honorable Minister Mentor Lee Kuan Yew. He is accompanied by Her Excellency Zhang Xiaokang, Mr. Chua Tian-po, and Professor Tommy Koh.
It was 30 years ago, that is December 1978, that the historical third plenary session of the 11th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China was held, which officially initiated China's reform and opening up. Since then, China has made a great historical transition from a highly centralized planned economy to a vigorous socialist market economy, and from being closed and semi-closed to all-around opening up.
应新加坡总理李光耀的邀请，邓小平副总理于1978年11月12日到达新加坡进行友好访问。
Well, he came here in late November '78. He had been to Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, then Singapore. He then saw 3 supposedly third world capitals better than Shanghai. So that shook him.
邓小平副总理及其一行来到新加坡住房和发展局22层办公大厦顶层，瞭望新建成的公共住房。新加坡政府重视解决住房问题，每年建筑面积的2/3是10层到20层的公共住房大楼。
And in Singapore, he found that we had a very egalitarian society. Everybody owns their own home, and a capitalist economy.
邓小平副总理和夫人卓琳到伊斯卡纳宫总统办公室拜会新加坡总统本杰明·亨利·希尔斯和夫人杨细玉。
And so he engaged us informally. How does this come about? So we explained to him. So it must have dawned on him that you can work the capitalist system and yet bring about egalitarian or more or less socialist results. So when he went back, I think he must already have been thinking for several years that the communist system was not working.
Yeah.
So that December, he decided on opening up, I think, 6 special economic zones. We sparked off in him the ideas that we can use the world's capital, technology, expertise, and develop.
Now that INSEAD has a branch in Abu Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi, yeah?
Yeah.
How is it operational?
It's operational. It's starting. We opened it last year, and it has to find its way, of course. But
I was there last week.
Enormous demand.
Yeah, I was there last week with the Crown Prince and to see the economic people, the oil people.
Yeah.
Singapore, we are quite easy. We are small countries,
Yeah.
and we're English speaking. They are English speaking as far as concerned. We have a lot in common.
According to you, what is the Singapore model?
Well, in your sense, it's really getting talent. No, we are in a good location, yes, but we have to collect talent and treat everybody equal, give everybody equal opportunity, education, and housing and healthcare, 3 fundamentals. The rest up to them. The Singapore model is just a pragmatic model. Wherever it works, we have no fixed ideology. Our key is that we look to the world as our market. We have no domestic market. And the good thing is that we are English speaking. We treat everybody, Indian, Chinese, Malay, equal.
Well, we are not ideologies. I mean, I'm interested in theories and formulas, but I'm more interested in what works. And if a theory doesn't work, I push it aside and try another one. And what works, we implement and improve on. We are pragmatists. We are pragmatists in the sense that we are utilitarians.
Singapore has been the most successful country in the past 40 years. Japan was the most successful in the past 50 years. It too was a one-party state for nearly all of that time. China's been the most successful in the past 30 years. It too was a one-party state. And Singapore the most successful in the past 40 years. Not suggesting that one-party states are good, but facts are These countries have done well. They've had smart people running them. Deng Xiaoping in China was a brilliant guy, it turns out. The guy running this place was a brilliant guy. So they put it all together. They've worked hard, saved and invested, and they've directed their energies and their capital into the right areas. It's worked.
I say without the slightest remorse that we wouldn't be here, we would not have made the economic progress if we had not intervened on very personal matters. Who your neighbor is, how you live, the noise you make, how you spit or where you spit, or what language you use. Had we not done that and done it effectively, we would not be here today.
And the government has been very wise in terms of crafting the right policies. It's been guided by meritocracy. It's been very fair and transparent. So the people of Singapore, I think, have a great deal of trust in the government. Maybe so much so that, the opposition maybe is a little weak. But if you look at what the PAP has been able to achieve in Singapore, then I think you can see why the people would be quite happy with the way it is.
They provide to the people what the people want.
And that is?
And the people in Singapore are very happy. They have some of the best healthcare standards in the world. Singapore has got no racial tensions. I mean, there are many wonderful things that Singapore has accomplished. And that's why you'll find that the number of people who want to come and live in Singapore is much greater than the number of people leaving Singapore.
The social compact is we will give you a stake in life. We'll give you and your child, all your children, good education, good health, a home. The rest is up to your effort. How well you do it, how well you work, how high you get up, it depends on you. We do not promise you equal results. We promise you equal opportunities.
Every worker has his own savings and his own saving pool. But the state doesn't promise to take care of you forever, because we feel that creates a dependency on the state which is unhealthy.
Well, when you're out of a job, we find you a job. And if it is not as good as your old pay, we give you a supplement. But if you refuse that job, then you get nothing. So you must work. In other words, what we are trying to do is personal responsibility. You are responsible for yourself and your family.
That's a big lesson we've learned from what we call excessive social welfarism in states.
Excessive social welfarism.
Yeah, I see, we believe, by the way, we do believe you have to provide a safety net for some people, okay? People who are disabled or handicapped or a single mother with kids and all that. You have to help them. You can create, but you must create ways of helping them without creating a disincentive to work.
Well, I would say we are different societies. Europe went through 2 devastating wars, which nearly destroyed it after the Second World War. Then it recovered with the help of the Marshall Plan. And with American capital and technology, it caught up very quickly. And because this is my explanation of why there is this social contract between the leaders and the people, because the people paid in blood for the war, during the war. So the British, for instance, or the French or the Germans, they feel very strongly that the country owes this to their workers, because they were the people who bled, paid in blood during the war, and they were the people who worked hard to bring back the economies after the war. Therefore, there's a reluctance to break that social contract.
And the French workers who's used to retiring at full pension at the age of 50, and even though life expectancy has gone up to 80 or 90, to tell him, hey, you must carry on working till 60 or 70, will say, no, I'm not going to carry on working. I was promised at the age of 20. Yeah. But you made the promise at the age of 20 in a different world. The world has changed. You have new competition. You have to adapt. You see, you can afford to be ideological when you are sure that you'll be forever affluent and prosperous, right? Then you can tell the world, you should do this, you should do this, you should do that. But it's a much more competitive world economy. We all have to adapt and adjust. And so this is something that Europeans can learn from Asians, to learn to be pragmatic. I studied European philosophy, and I was always told that you must open your mind and consider other possibilities. But the European mind has become progressively more ideological, closed. And it cannot conceive of alternative models of development. It has only one model, and if you are in the model, you're right. If you're outside the model, you're wrong. The world of black and white has ended. Now we live in a world of many shades of grey. And Europe and America have got to accommodate that and understand that.